a man wakes up on the damp soil. The smell of wet clay is still on his skin, where lions sleep peacefully next to lambs. And nobody ever has to pull a thistle or sweat through their shirt just to get a meal. Fishermen cast their nets across the shoreline. Fruit trees spring up on both sides of the river, their leaves never withering, their fruit never failing. This is not a geographical prediction. It is a theological promise. God is saying that the Eden, the delight, the life-giving presence that was lost at the beginning of the story is going to break out of the temple and flood the dead places of the world. 600 years later, an old man exiled on a rocky prison island sees the exact same current. John looks at the end of the human story, and he sees a city descending out of the sky. There is no temple in this city. There is no sun, but there is a river, water flowing, clear as crystal, right down the middle of the great street. And standing on both sides of the river, its roots drinking from the banks, is the tree of life. The flaming sword is gone. The leaves are yielding fruit for the healing of the nations. The gates are standing wide open. The biblical authors are tracking this water from the very first page of the text to the very last. But the profound problem is what you do while you are waiting for the river to arrive. Because right now, you are not living in the garden, and you are not yet walking in the city. You are living somewhere else entirely. They picture a flawless, effortless paradise. But if you look closer at the specific language the Hebrew author uses, you sit in the sterile, fluorescent glare of a modern office, or stare at the ceiling in the heavy quiet of a Tuesday night, feeling a profound, unexplainable sense of displacement. We spend our entire lives trying to recreate the garden. We build our own little walled enclosures. We buy the right house, plant the greenest grass, install the security cameras, and try to engineer a private sanctuary that will keep the chaos of the world securely outside. We curate our environments to maximize comfort and minimize friction. We try to extract Eden pleasure, delight, rest from our careers, our vacations, our relationships, hoping that if we just arrange the pieces perfectly, we will finally feel safe. But it never quite works. The thorns still creep through the floorboards. The relationships still fracture under the weight of expectations. The medical diagnosis still comes through the phone line and shatters the peace you worked a decade to build. And the cold glow of a screen at 2 a.m. cannot replace the unmediated presence you were actually wired to experience. When you try to squeeze ultimate, eternal delight out of finite, temporary things, they simply break in your hands. This is the reality of living east of Eden. You are walking through a world that still retains breathtaking echoes of its original beauty. At the actual name God assigned to this piece of ancient dirt, you start to realize the paradise reading misses the point entirely, but is fundamentally infected with the curse of autonomy. We wanted the tree of knowledge. We wanted to define good and bad for ourselves, apart from the source of life. And we are currently drowning in the consequences of that ancient choice. That persistent, humming anxiety in your chest is not a psychological malfunction. It is a spiritual homesickness. You are longing for a capacity of delight that this current earth can no longer provide. You are feeling the gravitational pull of the presence you were created to walk alongside in the cool of the day. You are mourning a home you have never physically seen, because the memory of it is written into your spiritual DNA. The human story could have easily ended right here, in the dust of our own exile. The Creator could have left us to fight the weeds on our own, waiting thousands of years for a heavenly city that has not yet descended. But the narrative of Scripture does not leave you stranded in the desert. The God of Genesis does not just stand on the other side of the flaming sword, waiting for you to figure out how to bypass the cherubim. He steps into the dirt himself. The real question of Genesis 2 isn't, where exactly was the garden? It's this: what was the garden actually made of? And to break the ancient curse of the very first tree, he has to walk into a garden in the middle of the night. A man walks into an olive grove. The night air is cold. The ancient trees cast thick, heavy shadows across the dirt. He falls to his knees. He presses his face into the soil. He bleeds from his pores. The sweat drops hit the dry dust like rain. This is not a random location. The human story fractured in a garden. The restoration has to begin in one. Look at the symmetry of the text. Look at the deliberate echoes. In the first garden, the first Adam stands before a tree. He is tempted to assert his autonomy. He chooses his own will. He brings death into the world. In the second garden, the second Adam falls before the shadow of a different tree. He is tempted to escape the suffering. He surrenders his autonomy. He says, "Not my will, but yours be done." In the first garden, the ground is cursed to produce thorns and thistles. Hours after the second garden, the man wears the thorns pressed violently into his skull. The first man was exiled eastward, barred by a flaming sword. The second man walks willingly into the fire of judgment to open the way back in. He is nailed to the wood. He breathes his last. He is buried. We are a species entirely exhausted by our own existence. We wake up. We commute. We work. And the Apostle John includes a very specific, historically grounded detail about the location of the tomb. John, chapter 19, verse 41. At the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden. 3 days later, a woman stands in the early morning light. The heavy stone is rolled back. The linen cloths are folded on the cold floor. She is weeping. She turns around and sees a man standing in the dawn, but her eyes are blurred with tears. John tells us she assumes he is the gardener. This is not a case of mistaken identity. It is a massive theological announcement. He is the gardener. He is the one who planted the very first trees in the east. He is the one who walked in the cool of the day. And now, standing in the morning dew, with the dirt of death defeated under his bare feet, he is beginning the new creation. The cross is not just a Roman execution tool. It is the tree of life, replanted in the wasteland of the human condition. Its roots go deep into our sin. Its branches stretch out to offer healing. The Eden, the luxury, the delight, the unmediated presence of the Creator is no longer locked behind the cherubim. It has walked out of the tomb. We try to carve out a tiny sliver of peace on a Friday night, and we do it all over again. It is loose in the world. But that reality changes entirely what you do with your own exhaustion tomorrow morning. A garden was planted in the ancient dust, and a sanctuary of presence was established. A choice was made beneath the branches, and humanity was driven eastward into the thorns. A word was pressed into the Hebrew parchment, and a physical utopia was revealed as a spiritual delight. A river flowed out of a prophetic temple, and a dead sea came crashing back to life. A savior sweat blood in an olive grove, and the curse of autonomy was finally surrendered. A crown of thorns was pressed into his skull, and the judgment of the wasteland was absorbed. A gardener stood alive in the morning dawn, and the flaming sword was finally extinguished. One thread, one story. But here is the part I keep coming back to. The word Eden, not a location you have to find on a map, not an agricultural paradise you have to engineer with your own hands, but delight. The reality that the Creator of the cosmos did not build you to be a slave to the dirt, but designed you specifically for the pleasure of His unmediated presence. If you are in a season where you are exhausted from trying to build, we carry a quiet, humming anxiety in our chests and our jaws. And because of this exhaustion, your own walled enclosure, where the anxiety of maintaining your own little paradise is crushing your chest. You can stop fighting the weeds on your own. You do not have to curate a perfect life to experience peace. The tree of life has already been replanted. If this opened something in you, subscribe. Leave a comment. Even one word helps. Share this with someone who is exhausted from trying to hold their own world together. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts. And may the God who pursued humanity into the wasteland meet you in your exact exile and lead you back to His delight. We tend to look backward at the beginning of the book. We view the original garden as the place where struggle didn't exist yet. We treat it like a cosmic resort we were unfairly evicted from. We assume the central tragedy of the human story is that we lost our perfect environment. Eden is not a location on a map. It is a capacity for delight. He opens his eyes to a canopy of heavy green leaves, sunlight fracturing through the branches and hitting the dust. When you read the text with modern eyes, you look for coordinates. You look for rivers that match modern geography. You look for historical proof of a paradise. But the ancient reader was looking for something completely different. They were looking at how the space was arranged, to feel the weight of what was actually lost. When the flaming sword was placed at the entrance, you have to step back into the ancient mindset. You have to look at how the ground itself was designed, because there is a detail hiding in plain sight, right there in the topsoil. If you open a modern map, you look for borders, elevations, and rivers. You want to know exactly where the mountains stop and the valleys begin. You measure distance in kilometers and climate in degrees. But an ancient Near Eastern reader did not map the world by topography. They mapped the world by presence. If you lived in the ancient world, you understood the brutal, unforgiving reality of the landscape. You knew the baking heat of the Mesopotamian sun, the feeling of cracked mud crumbling beneath your sandals, the constant, desperate search for a reliable well. To survive in that environment meant finding an oasis, a place where springs flowed from the rock and thick foliage cast heavy, cooling shadows over the dirt. The world is completely silent, except for the sound of a river rushing somewhere in the distance. In that cultural context, a garden was not a public park. It was the exclusive, walled domain of a king. Monarchs across the ancient world built massive, heavily guarded botanical enclosures where they could retreat from the harshness of the surrounding desert. These spaces were filled with the scent of blooming flowers, the taste of exotic fruits, and the sound of captive streams engineered to flow through the courtyards. So, when the author of Genesis writes that God planted a garden in the east, the ancient audience immediately recognizes the architectural language. Genesis is not giving you a topographical map. It is giving you a temple blueprint. The text deliberately describes a river flowing out of Eden to water the garden, which then divides into 4 distinct headwaters, stretching across the known world. In ancient temple architecture, the source of life-giving water always originates from the inner sanctum, the very seat of the deity, and flows outward to bring vitality to the barren, chaotic dirt beyond the walls. The water carries the life of the king out to the edges of his empire. You can almost hear the rush of the current echoing against the stones, carrying the scent of cedar and the heavy fragrance of damp earth out into the dry wind. Modern readers get entirely derailed right here. We get obsessed with identifying the Tigris and Euphrates. He breathes in. His chest rises, and his lungs fill with cold, sharp air for the very first time, trying to triangulate the exact GPS coordinates of a lost physical utopia. We treat the ancient text like a buried treasure map, hoping to dig up the original gates somewhere in the Middle East so we can prove it was real. But the original audience was looking at the structure of the space, recognizing the deliberate, 3-tiered design of a royal sanctuary. There is the wild, untamed earth outside. There is the cultivated garden itself. And there is the hidden, central source where the water actually begins. And to understand what happens at that source, you have to look at what is growing right in the middle of it. Because at the exact epicenter of this royal enclosure, the ground splits open, and something emerges that forces a permanent choice. The man stands in the exact center of the enclosure. The humidity clings to his skin. The heavy scent of ripe fruit hangs in the air. Every direction he looks, there is life bursting from the dirt. Trees for shade, trees for food, trees for beauty. The text tells us every tree is pleasing to the eye. Every tree is good for food. He can reach out. He can pull down a branch. He can eat until he is full. Water rushes from the ground. The soil yields without a fight. He breathes in. He breathes out. This is how the human story begins. Dirt and breath. Then, God does something highly specific. Every single day is a gift of rhythm and provision. Absolute abundance. Absolute freedom. But the center of the garden holds attention. 2 trees stand side by side in the middle of the sanctuary. The tree of life. The tree of the knowledge of good and bad. They do not look dangerous. they do not look out of place. The bark feels exactly the same under his hands. The leaves catch the wind with the exact same rustling sound. Most people read this moment and see a cosmic trap, a test set up for failure, a divine wire hung just low enough for a fragile human to trip over it. The second tree is not a trap. It is an invitation to trust. One tree represents dependence. The other tree represents autonomy. To eat from the first tree is to receive life as a gift from the Creator. To eat from the second tree is to seize life on your own terms. God speaks the boundary clearly in the open air. Eat from any tree. Eat freely. Eat abundantly. But not that one. If you eat from that one, you will die. The choice is written into the wood itself. The man and the woman stand before the branches. They listen to a voice that is not God's. A hiss in the leaves. A whisper of doubt. Did God really say? The fruit looks good to the eyes. The fruit looks desirable. The fruit promises wisdom. She reaches out her hand. He does not just leave the man in the open wilderness to fend for himself. He places him somewhere. Her fingers brush the smooth skin of the fruit. She pulls. The stem snaps. She eats. She hands it to him. He eats. The juice is still on their hands when the atmosphere shifts. The air suddenly feels cold. Their eyes open. The nakedness is no longer innocent. It is terrifying. They run. They hide among the very trees they were supposed to tend. The evening breeze blows through the garden. You can hear the sound of footsteps walking in the dirt. God comes looking for them in the shadows. They are banished, driven eastward. A flaming sword turns back and forth, guarding the way back to the center. Most readers close the chapter, assuming humanity just lost a physical paradise. They think we lost our perfect weather and our easy food. But the tragedy of Genesis 3 is not about a lost location. The real loss is hidden in the very name of the garden. If you run your finger across the ink of a modern English Bible and stop at Genesis chapter 2, verse 8, you will read a sentence that seems entirely straightforward. The text says, "Now the Lord God had planted a garden in the east, in Eden, and there he put the man he had formed." When we read that in English, we treat the word as a proper noun, a location entirely distinct from the rest of the wild. Untamed earth, a space specifically planted, ordered, and cultivated for him to exist within. We treat it like London, or Tokyo, or Jerusalem, a fixed geographical coordinate stamped into the ancient dirt. We assume the text is simply telling us the name of the province where the garden was located, as if you could walk there today, if you just had the right map. But the word the original Hebrew author presses into the parchment is the noun Eden. To feel the weight of this word, you have to remember how the rest of the ancient world thought about the divine. In the surrounding ancient Near Eastern cultures, the gods were almost always depicted as angry, demanding landlords. The Babylonian creation myths, for example, describe humans being created out of the blood of a murdered god, designed strictly to be slaves so the deities wouldn't have to work the ground. You were born into a system of cosmic debt, forced to sweat and bleed in the dust just to keep the gods pacified. But the Hebrew text introduces a creator who operates completely differently. He does not create humans to serve him food. He creates a space of staggering beauty, fills it with fruit, and invites the humans to feast. Because the Hebrew word Eden literally translates to luxury, pleasure, or delight. If discovering that the original language of the Bible, most people read the opening chapters of Genesis and assume they are looking at an ancient atlas, completely rewrites the stories you thought you knew is stirring up something inside of you. You're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. Because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So the writer of the Psalms picks up this exact same concept centuries later. In Psalm Kolmekumentekusi, verse 8, David is writing a song about the protective, overwhelming presence of God, and he writes this: "They feast on the abundance of your house, and you give them drink from the river of your delights." The Hebrew phrase David uses for your delights is Adanika, a direct derivative of Eden. David is not talking about a lost agricultural garden from thousands of years ago. He is talking about the present tense reality of taking refuge in the presence of the Creator. That root meaning completely rewrites the tragedy of the 3rd chapter of Genesis. When humanity was exiled, driven out into the blistering heat and the thorns of the untamed world, they did not just lose a perfect climate. They did not just lose easy access to food and a life without weeds. They lost the very thing they were created for. Eden was not a physical utopia. It was the unmediated delight of walking with God in the cool of the day. And the moment, they think of this location as a physical utopia lost to time, a botanical reserve with perfect weather. You realize that the garden was about presence rather than geography. You start to see a profound pattern regarding the river that flowed out of it. A priest stands in the rubble of a destroyed city. The year is 573 BC, and Jerusalem is a graveyard of scorched stones and shattered cedar. The temple is gone. The presence is gone. The delight is gone. But God gives the prophet Ezekiel a vision, and he does not show him a blueprint for a new fortress. He shows him water, a trickle at first, seeping out from beneath the eastern threshold of a new temple. It runs over the smooth stones. It pools in the dry dust. Then the current accelerates. The water deepens, and it reaches the prophet's ankles. The water rushes, and it reaches his knees. The water roars, and it becomes a massive, surging river that no man can cross. And you have to watch exactly where the water travels. It flows east. Just like the river in Genesis 2, it pours down through the barren ravines and crashes into the Dead Sea, a body of water, so heavily choked with salt that the shores are crusted white and nothing can breathe beneath the heavy surface. But when the temple water hits the salt water, the Dead Sea comes to life. Fish swarm the banks in the splashing current.